Thank you very much, Professor Stockhoff. Would you like to get questions? Are there any questions? Please, Matilde. Whoops.
Hello, Keith Adams. If the ERC didn't exist, but there was a wealthy funding organization, perhaps a Getty funding, don't you think we'd have just as good research, and that the fundamental thing is not the Europeanness, but the interpersonal relationships between the collaborators on a project that we've seen much evidence of today?
Yeah, as I said, of course, science is truly an international endeavor, and let me just say I focused on the European aspect because I think that is important. But just to make that clear, the funding schemes that the ERC runs are open to everybody, as long as a principal investigator, one is willing to spend host its project at a European institution and spend 50% of the time working on the project at that European host institution. So science is international. But I think that in this day of an age where the tendency to put national interests first, especially in Europe, and the current developments, clearly point in that direction. I think it's important to stress that things like the ERC, and there are also other things that are funded by the European Union, contribute to creating something that is more than just a transaction between national interests. You do something and you get something in return, and you put something in and you get something in return. As a European research community, as part of an international research community, we should be seen as counteracting those forces of nationalistic thinking. And that's why I think, I hope that the ERC can serve as an example of how that would work, or how it actually works. Because if we talk to grantees of the ERC, if you visit projects, you see people from all across the globe. And what binds them is their interest in the questions that they want to solve, and the results that they want to get. And that's how it should be. I hope that answers your question.
May I add to it that I think it's not irrelevant the collaborative nature of the funding body. In an immeasurable smaller scale, we see that with the Consortium of European Research Libraries. It is a bottom-up collaborative enterprise that really works well because everybody is contributing to it. And I think no individual equivalent, however long-sighted, would probably give the same, apart also from the fact that in the realm of reality, the enormous logistical exercise in terms of collaboration and discussions that has taken the creation of the ERC in the most liberal way would probably be difficult to replicate in reality out of an individual entity. But if there were such thing, it would be wonderful. I mean, more the merrier. Can you think of one?
I'm sure you know all this very, very well, but I've obviously aware of a lot of ERC-funded projects, and one hears nice things and one hears bad things. There seem, I think, to be two principal complaints about ERC-funded projects, and I think their weaknesses are central, because the ERC model is actually, in a way, the American model. You give very large chunks of money to people who before didn't have that money, and they have to spend it in a certain arc of time. There are two complaints I hear fairly often. The first is not in any way applicable to Christina. I think Christina was the exception possibly to this rule, that especially in the humanities, this money arrives in the hands of people who are very bad managers. And there can be some serious administrative problems in the running of some projects. Obviously not all projects, but there does seem to be sometimes a problem in the amount of preparation people have before they receive these monies. The other complaint one inevitably hears is the absence of long-term continuity. In that, I'll just give an example of one project I know about, the Bernstein Memory of Paper project, which is something I've been interested in and I collaborate with. That is a fairly early ERC grant. It was a very important one. It was an innovative project. Of course, the problem is that when ERC money stops, even a project that's very good and very successful suddenly cannot carry on, you see. And I think the European Research Council is aware of this problem. But sometimes you have very good projects, they have their legs chopped out from under them because it's very difficult to get funding again for exactly the same problem, even if that project would have needs precisely to carry on as it is, because it's significant.
Well, let me start with the second problem, the continuity. Yeah, that's definitely, everybody is aware of that. Projects run for 5 years at a maximum. Of course, it's possible if you have a starting grant to get another starting grant, that happens, or a consolidated grant or an advanced grant. But every time you have to face the competition, and that's something that's built into the very essence of the ERC. So yeah, that is a problem. But we have to realize that if you look at the total research expenditure in the European area, then the ERC represents slightly less than 1% of that. So obviously it can't solve that problem just by itself. Continuity, especially when it comes to things like infrastructures, right? Maintaining databases, keeping them available, keeping them up to date, is a responsibility of other organizations, of the national infrastructures of universities, conglomerates of universities, and so on and so forth. They have difficulty spending the money there, but at least it's in their remit. Your first point, I wouldn't say that the ERC model is the American model, especially not in the humanities. Right? If I look at my American colleagues, they are not used to working in large projects. Right? They don't define a research project with a runtime of 5 years involving a couple of postdocs and 3 PhDs and themselves. Right? They just want to be left alone and write a beautiful book or a couple of interesting papers, and they do that very well, at least successful among them. So this funding scheme is actually, and that's your second point. So it's sort of it may be slightly antagonistic to the humanities of old, I would say. I used to spend 6 years of my life before getting involved in the ERC, chairing the humanities division of the Dutch National Science Foundation, the NWO. And we had two slogans at the time, focus and mass. Right? And we were trying to get these very small individual working humanities scholars, getting them used to thinking in terms of larger projects. And that there was opposition to that. People said that's not the way in which humanities work, by which they usually meant that's not the way in which I work or have worked up to now. But with a little incentive here and there, they got used to it, and especially the humanities scholars, the Dutch humanities scholars are disproportionately successful in ERC type schemes. So, yeah, it's get with the program and make the best of it. And I think, I mean, if I look at the portfolio of projects that the ERC funds in the social sciences and in the humanities, I think they're really well-designed programs that don't have this, which is sometimes what people think, well, you put something together and you put a staple through it, and then you have a long-term project. That's not the way it works. I mean, projects that are thought of like that, they never succeed. So I'm completely convinced that there's more than enough evidence that this scale fits the humanities as much as it fits the social sciences, the physical sciences. Of course, in some of the physical sciences, especially in engineering, they say, well, the scale is not large enough. If you look at people working in high energy physics, they have a difficulty of finding small enough projects that they can put to the ERC. Okay, well, you can't please everybody, so they have to get their larger scale funding from elsewhere.
Thank you very much, Professor Stokov, for being with us. And with this, I would like to close this day, invite you all to come to the exhibition, and thank you.